I'm Rosie and I'm from Dublin and I'm a solicitor by training and I work for an NGO representing asylum seekers and refugees. My idea will benefit women, but it will also benefit men, children, families, employees, employers and society at large by increasing the number of women who are participating in Irish life. I joined Fine Gael for a number of reasons. I was in America last year and I was there for the election and I saw kind of the fallout from the election and how quickly things can shift. And I felt like, you know, I have a lot of beliefs and principles and whatever else, and if you don't stand up and kind of fight for them, then somebody else might, and you might see things changing in a way you don't want it to. Fine Gael, as a large party and as a party of government, has the means to make these changes a reality. So instead of, you know, arguing from the sidelines or shouting up at a window that's closed off, you're in the room where it's happening. I think the team are going to react very positively. I think it's a big idea and there's going to be practical implications, of course. But at the same time, I see this as having a really positive impact for everyone in Irish society, and I think the team will see that too. Hello, I'm Rosie, and today I'm pitching for a Department of Women's Affairs. And I'm making this pitch because it's now 40 years since equality legislation was first introduced, but progress has been slow, and women remain underrepresented across many areas in the economy and in society, especially in senior management and in leadership roles. So removing formal barriers to participation was an important part of ending discrimination, but there's more to be done. And what we need is positive, proactive steps to encourage a change in culture, in practice, and in our expectations for women. So rather than focusing just on representation as numbers on a page, a Department of Women's Affairs could get straight to the point. It could ensure that women are represented across a range of policy areas. The department could have responsibility for substantive policy around issues such as participation in the economy, childcare, and women's health. But it could also play an important advisory role by ensuring that other departments have a chance to gender-proof their policies and to consider the impact of policies on women as a group. This means that rather than waiting and hoping for representation to increase over time, we'll always have a minister at the cabinet table who's responsible for representing the interests of women. Women are, after all, over half the population, but we're underrepresented in decision-making roles in society. The effect of this is that there's an inevitable tension between the people shaping and structuring our society, our businesses, and our government, and the people who are trying to fit into those structures. And the benefits aren't just a nice-sounding, more modern, more equal Ireland. It's also about a vibrancy of perspective and of experience when setting policy. And alongside that, we're also going to ensure that women's talent and their education and their expertise are used fully for the benefit of everyone, and that includes women, men, children, and families. So while it's not easy to create the kind of change that equality promises, in this centenary year of women getting the vote, this department would mark a new commitment to include women in Irish life more fully. So what's needed is positive action and a strong guiding hand from government. And this is something which I think a women's department could do very well. Thank you.
And breathe. You made that look very easy. Well done, Rosie. Okay, let's open it up now to our team. Helen, in particular, this is an area that you yourself are very passionate about. So what do you think of Rosie's idea of having a Department of Women's Affairs?
Well, I suppose coming from a profession maybe where we've generally been, for the most part, male-dominated, and we're only starting to see change, I think it's particularly poignant that you're making this pitch in the year that we're in. It's 100 years, as you say, since the women got the vote. And I do think it is quite a radical move, as you said yourself. But I think if you're not able to, and women aren't able to stand up for themselves, and you're very clearly doing that here, you're a very clearly young, capable woman standing up for women and putting what I think is a very plausible idea forward. I think we have had to make radical moves in the past. We look at in politics, we've introduced Fine Gael a gender quota where 30% of candidates had to be female, otherwise parties lost money. And we've seen how that has actually made a really significant improvement in the number of women putting themselves forward, but also actually being elected. What I would ask maybe, I suppose, and this is maybe looking at what we already have in place here and maybe other countries, how they have worked to try and progress women's rights. I think there's maybe one country within Europe that has a specific department with women, I suppose, in the title and with other areas as well, whereas for the most part we've done it through justice departments, where we've introduced here in Ireland our own national women and children's strategy where it comes across all departments. So I'm just wondering, have you looked at maybe other countries where they've had specific departments? How has that worked? Has it been particularly I suppose progressive in moving things forward quicker, or what kind of research in that area have you done?
Yeah, so there's a Department of Women's Affairs in Australia and in New Zealand, And I think what it does, it not only ensures that resources are allocated to a panel of people who are expert in the area and who are particularly focused on women, but it also encourages everybody in government to think about things in those terms. It's worked out very well there, and it also actually happened here as well under Gareth Fitzgerald in the 1980s. It was only it was a part of the office of the Department of on Taoiseach, but it worked very well then for about 5 years. It was a good trial, but it's something which I think we could do again, and I think it would reinvigorate our focus in policy terms on women. It's something which I think benefits absolutely everybody in society. If we can get it right for women, then the benefits flow for their partners, for their children, or for people who aren't women. You have mothers, you have daughters, you have sisters, so everybody benefits.
Do you think, maybe could I ask, so the strategy, say, that was launched last year, so we have the Women and Girls strategy, which was launched last year. It's set out a number of recommendations across the board to try and integrate it within the various different departments so that it really becomes a natural part of the process when ministers are looking at their own strategies and policies, that women are at the fore, and that it, I suppose, encourages equality. Do you think that there's maybe a role, maybe not as a minister, but somebody else to champion that further, to strengthen that, or would you still think outside of that there should be a specific department?
Well, I mean, I think the practicalities of having a department are always kind of difficult, but I definitely think it needs somebody who's going to take the lead on it, and I think the benefit of having somebody at cabinet table is that there's a responsibility and there's somebody there who can step forward and really champion these things, because sometimes, as you all know, strategies don't always follow through to fruition. So I think one good way of doing that is to have somebody who's at the cabinet table who's saying, we're succeeding here, we're not succeeding there, we need to do more here, we need more resources there. And that's why I think it's a question of leadership, and somebody leading from the front can do a huge amount for that. So definitely the strategy is part of it, but I think we also need somebody who's taking the lead on it.
I'll just say, I think possibly we have somebody here that might in the future take the lead politically or not. Maybe that's, I don't know, but I think you've put forward a very good pitch.
I don't feel it feels that way, Helen. Absolutely. Well done. You've clearly done your homework. Very quickly, before we wrap up with the team, Leo.
Two questions. First of all, we are looking for candidates, by the way.
30%, right?
Moving swiftly along, I'd have two questions that I would ask. I think this could work, but there are two questions that arise. There's no limit on the number of government departments you can have. There is a limit on the number of cabinet ministers. It's 15. So if it was standalone, which minister would you get rid of? Not person, but which would it be? Children? Would it be children? Would it be education? Would it be health? Would it be social section? What would it be? Or would you combine it with another department, which you can do? I'm minister for two departments, as Simon has been as well in the past. And then secondly, is there not a risk of siloisation? Like Joseph and I were at the Cabinet Subcommittee today on social policy. We were trying to push government departments to all do their bit for gender equality. So we were kind of pushing the Department of Business to do something on gender pay and women's representation in the boardroom. We were pushing Justice to do things around...
in many different areas, and I was talking about my own department of what we've done in Culture and Heritage of the Gael. Do you mind me interjecting?
The risk in setting up a standalone dedicated department is it lets every other department off the hook.
Yeah.
So instead of business doing their thing on gender pay and balance on boards, instead of health taking an interest in women's health and prioritising it, they can say, oh, there's this new department. That's not our problem anymore. Exactly. That's the risk.
Yeah.
Sorry, just
just one quick point. I think the Taoiseach makes a valid point, and I suppose when you're talking about a dedicated department for women affairs, I mean, as a woman, of course, I'm instantly attracted to it. And then on the other hand, it's a bit like gender quotas. I have a love-hate relationship with it. We may well look at it into the future as something that we won't need. I mean, it's sort of disappointing that in a way that we even have to talk about it. But as the Taoiseach said, if we're working cross-department anyway, there shouldn't be a need for it. But I think it's a very valid proposal that you make, and I think the point about representation and participation are very different points as well, and I appreciate all
we need to move on to our next picture, but just before...
just a very brief point, because the last government made a decision like this when we set up the Department of Children, which was a first. And that was to have someone around the cabinet table that was focused first and foremost on children and trying to coordinate with other government departments. So the point that Leo makes is right, that but there's also sometimes a role for singling out an area that needs special attention, maybe not forever, but for a number of years. Yeah. And we felt, certainly under Enda Kenny, we felt that children needed that special treatment. in government, particularly through a very difficult economic period, that families and children needed protection through that period. And it worked, I think. And, you know, Catherine Zappone now focusing on children and youth affairs, I think without that focus on that department, we mightn't have had the kind of radical changes in childcare that we've seen, for example, in the last 2 years. So I think there is a role at times, but the question Leo asks is a fair one. If you're going to add another department and another minister, well then, who do you cut? Which department do you cut, which isn't easy.
Perhaps just have a minister with responsibility specifically, which maybe we don't if it comes across a number of different areas at the moment. So maybe that's...
This is exactly what you want. A lot of discussion, a lot of opinion, a lot of feedback. Well, Rosie, they all want to come in and give their feedback there. Well done.
Yeah, it's a good sign, isn't it? Yeah, it was very, very interesting to hear their feedback, and I think it's great that they were asking those questions, because those are absolutely the questions we need to ask. You know, it is a big idea, and I think there are a lot of practical implications. But even just to get that conversation started, I thought was really, really positive.
And it seems like right now is the time to have this conversation. There seems to be a shift happening, so perhaps it's all a timing issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you have to kind of jump on these things when there's a bit of momentum. I do think, you know, it's the centenary year. It's been 100 years since we've been voting. There's really no excuse anymore for women not to be represented equally. But I do think it's about, you know, removing the barriers, but also encouraging women more. And it can be difficult. It's difficult to do these things, but you just have to go with it and you have to step forward.